Today is November 13th, 2011, and the empire is disintegrating, and they don't care anymore about an empire. They just assume see everything collapse, everything destroyed. Maybe nuclear war, maybe things get wiped out in a financial collapse, and then there's no law and order, and people end up eating each other, and that's a good thing from their standpoint, because their empire's finished. We just heard that derivatives are up to 1.8 quadrillion. That's 1,800 trillion. That's the nominal value of derivatives. The Federal Reserve has gone since September 17th, when they started their quantitative easing, which they do not call quantitative easing. They've now, their assets have climbed from 300 billion to something like 1 point something trillion. So they've had a massive, maybe more than that, maybe 3 trillion. I think maybe it might be 3 trillion. So their assets are growing as they try to keep the interbank lending from collapsing, from freezing up, in which case everything goes down. So as we inch by inch come to the precipice of the great chasm of financial disaster, all throughout the world, color revolutions, coups are being attempted, religious wars, everything. And at the same time, Russia, China, India are moving against it. And so is Trump. So is Donald Trump. So today, you had the hearings. Now, you got to get a sense of this. I could not really watch the hearings much. I saw, scattering of the voice of former Ambassador Bill Taylor of Ukraine. And I was saying, wait a second, what's going on here? He's giving you an argument that Donald Trump has betrayed the principle of war with Russia and China. Donald Trump has betrayed our interests. Donald Trump won't stand up to Russia. Donald Trump won't. And I'm going, wait a second. This is supposed to be an impeachment hearing, not a geopolitical diatribe, rant and raving diatribe. But it went on for 41 minutes. And then when he finally was asked, is there anything there? He said, no. So what's going on? They're trying to use the hearings to convince the body, the public, the public, that maybe we don't have anything on Donald Trump, but he should go anyhow because he's a traitor, because he's not standing up to Russia and China, because he's not staying in all the wars. So you're back to the same old message from the very beginning, but but through the hearings. Now, how many Americans are going to have the stamina to listen to 41 minutes of a former ambassador pontificate and wonder what the hell is going on here? What is this? Well, my sense of it is that the impeachment hearings, the impeachment process, has other purposes than just removing Donald Trump through some legal process. They're using a legal process to run a psychological warfare against the U.S. population which has nothing to do with any impeachable crimes, but they're using the procedures involved in an impeachment process to actually try to convince the U.S. population or use psychological warfare against the president. And most of all, what it boils down to is that the president is going to be president when the system blows. He's going to be president if they don't get rid of him. And it doesn't look like they're going to easily get rid of Donald Trump. So the president's going to be the president in the financial collapse. And what does that mean? Well, there's Russia, there's China, there's India, there's Japan. What does it mean? They're involved in the collapse too. They're going to be part of the collapse also. So why do we have to collapse? Why don't we do something different? So you have essentially the possibility of a new financial structure agreed to between nations on how to do trade, how to fix exchange rates, how to do all of that. And that's the end of the City of London. That's the end of Wall Street's power over the world. Now, the International Monetary Fund did a study on what is the level of financial laundering of drugs in terms of monetary value, and the laundering of money from the drug trade. They estimated somewhere between 1.6 and $4 trillion a year is coming in, is circulating through the system based on drugs. In other words, these Mexican drug cartels are nothing but extension of London, of Wall Street. And who are the big money laundering banks? We'll take a guess. The biggest one, of course, is the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, an international bank that's always been in the drug trade from the very beginning. It was set up to run the drug trade in the 1850s, or be part of the financial side of the drug trade. And who are the other banks? Well, Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo. So, what does that mean? That HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, got a slap on the wrist by the U.S. Attorney, what was her name, in the Queens, and then Loretta Lynch. Loretta Lynch didn't lynch. She gave them a deferred, a special agreement, and then she became the Attorney General. The one who let off HSBC off the hook became the Attorney General under the final period of after 2015. So this is what you're dealing with, okay? And they know it's coming down, and they know it will be coming down, and they know that Trump is going to be the president. So they're angling the entire impeachment thing as an anti-Russia, anti-China operation. I've never seen anything like that, where they're politicizing the hearings on a policy with no substance of a crime. This is totally, they're using the pretend substance of a crime to run a psychological warfare, information warfare against the population. So how do people out there going to react to this? Is this supposed to be an impeachment hearing? What is it? What is this? What is this? I've never seen anything like it before. I know they did it to Nixon in the Watergate hearings. And of course, that was an inside palace coup. Nixon they wanted him out of the way because they couldn't control him. They wanted Nixon out of the way because they couldn't control him. Kissinger was running it from the inside. They wanted him out. But the point is, it was about Watergate. It was about, who was telling the truth about Watergate, who was the break-in, and so forth and so on. What about Clinton's impeachment? It was about, did he lie about getting a blowjob under oath. Yes, he did. Therefore, he has an impeachable crime. What is the impeachable crime? The fact that he lied under oath. That's an impeachable crime. Well, what about Trump? Donald Trump. So far, no impeachable crime has even been discussed, other than somehow he bribed the Ukrainians. Quid pro quo is part of being the president. That's part of how you do business. It's not a bribe. Bribe means you pay somebody individually to pay them off against the law. That's not what he did. He doesn't paying anybody off. He's saying, you know. So, and it wasn't even quid pro quo. So the whole thing is just not just a scam, but it is using misusing the impeachment process to organize a population for a coup. In other words, you organize the population, you reduce the popularity, and then you just hammer away and try to force him to resign. Meanwhile, you have other committees of Congress investigating all his personal finances, investigating, you know, all areas. So it's a political war. But it's all because Donald Trump is the president. He has rejected the neoliberal worldview. He has rejected the one world system. He has rejected the globalized destruction of the industrial might of the United States. He's rejected the drug trade as a core of our values, of our financial values. And you know, this is where the U.S. population is now being subjected to this psychological warfare through the impeachment process. Now, this also can backfire because a lot of people are saying, "Well, wait a second, what is this? What is this? You know, where, what?" So it's going to polarize the populations more. Now, there was another coup that took place, or the U.S. one hasn't taken place yet, but it's in the progress. There was another coup, and it has similarities in a certain way. And this was the coup run against Evo Morales of Bolivia, who's been in office for 13 years, was running, he won the election by 600,000 votes. Irregularities were claimed, and there was massive pressure put on him, and he resigned. But there was a component of this that's not being discussed in the media, which was there were right-wing, fascist, Catholic, fanatic Catholic people who hate indigenous people, who wanted to put the indigenous people of Bolivia back in their place. And they have been going around, like in Ukraine, like the Azov Brigade and these other type of things. They've been going around beating up, burning the houses of the leadership of the Bolivian political movement, which is a mass-based socialist movement. Okay, which had put Evo Morales into the presidency. And what Evo Morales did was he nationalized the resources so that he could fund a vast social program. And 42% of the poverty was reduced by 42%, and extreme poverty by 60%. This is enormous. Bolivia was the poorest country in Latin America, and the poorest country being Haiti. But beyond Haiti, not counting Haiti, Bolivia was the poorest country in the world, and it was 80% indigenous, or 75% indigenous. And they had their president, and he was getting the job done. He was actually starting the process, and he was on his way out of the control of the IMF. and he was involved in bringing the level of the population up. He was also promoting nuclear power in the space program and creating an environment where the children of these indigenous Bolivians would actually start to think in terms of becoming engineers or scientists or what have you. This is not allowed because you have this Spanish radical racist Franco type phalange that looks upon these indigenous peoples as not as slaves, basically. They don't look at them as people that have the potential to be like, to have an education and have knowledge. And these indigenous people have been in this condition for a long time. Many large portions of the indigenous populations don't even speak Spanish. They speak their native languages. And they have their own native customs. They have their own Andean Earth Mother. So when Luis Fernando Camacho, the leader of the paramilitary groups, came barging into the palace, which had been emptied and was burning, he said, Bolivia is for Christ, right? It was all about Christ versus the pagan indigenous peoples. So it had this religious quality. It's a crusade. It's a crusade against the pagan, demonic pagan, Andean, local Andean gods or whatever. This is how it is. And I don't know if you've ever met these kind of people, but they're like really, like this guy the guy who led this was a multimillionaire. He lost money because his family lost money because they nationalized. And he's been running these squads. He's been part of this whole paramilitary, which has been built up over the last decade and a half, actually. Just like in Ukraine. And so they unleashed this. And so Evo Morales is now in Mexico. And the Mexican government is recognizing him as a legitimate leader. Some woman has emerged from the parliament to claim to be the interim president. But there's no government now. All the people that were in the government are being beaten up, killed, or their houses burned and everything. And this is all backed by the United States State Department. All brought to you by National Endowment for Democracy and the illegal narcotics trade and whatever. And this is all coming out of the Santa Cruz area, which was the wealthy area, which was where the oil was and where the relatively non-indigenous Spaniards were. And so this has got the makings of a religious war, or not a religious war, at least a war against the idea, a religious war against the idea of the secular nation state. Now Mexico went through some of that after the revolution in 1910. In the late 1920s, because the Mexican government was not kind to the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church, they felt the Catholic Church was part of the landed aristocracy. They went after the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church launched a religious war against the government of Mexico. It was called the Cristero Rebellion. And 250,000 people perished in that rebellion in Mexico. This is 1929. It ended in 1929. 24 to 29. This thing in Bolivia has that smell to it. And the same in Brazil. You have the same kind of fanatic right-wing Catholic free market character in Bolsonaro, and you have the same thing in Chile with this guy, whatever his name is, whose brother was a minister in the Pinochet government and is the most celebrated privatizer of public health services. Pinera is the name, the Pinera brothers. And the guy is the president of Chile, who the people are now rioting against, has a estimated fortune of $2 to $3 billion. You know, and so this is what's so there's a rioting against that. So you have this kind of situation where these very and the reason I'm saying it has a quality of religious war is that the people who are fascist, who are carrying out these assaults on the population, have a sense that of going back to the good old days when these people were, would do anything, who were very servile and back in their place. So it has that kind of quality. But it can also disrupt U.S. relations with Mexico if the United States takes a very, continues to support these kind of things, which I'm not so sure Trump really supports those kind of things, but it's already been built in before he even came into office. All of this has been built in. But these are the coups that are being launched all over the world. And the same with the Hong Kong protesters. And the Chinese are not going to intervene. They're going to let the people of Hong Kong decide whether or not they want to stop it or not. They're not going to intervene. Because they don't want, it's not their problem. In other words, it's the British problem. The British and the U.S. created this mess in Hong Kong. So therefore, they're going to let the thing play out. And meanwhile, China's going ahead with the economic development of the rest of China and the Belt and Road. So this is the period we are entering where everything's going to be done to disrupt, to destabilize, to cause maximum chaos everywhere in the world, wherever it's possible, because we're heading into that situation. Now, Donald Trump has a problem. A large part of his base, political base, is Christian fundamentalists, right? End times. And you have to understand that the basis of the end times religious thing is the promotion of helplessness and the promotion of you can't do anything in the world because it's so corrupt. So you're drowning in corruption. Everyone around you is corrupt. So you basically take the position that God's going to punish the wicked in the end and rapture the rest, or some other formulation of this. And that, so along comes Donald Trump to make America great again, and a lot of these evangelicals cannot conceive of anything positive that humans can possibly do. So something like Trump becoming president can only be seen as a divine intervention. So, as paradoxical as that may sound, that's unfortunately where things stand, where the perception of Donald Trump as a divine intervention within the evangelical community is the only leverage that Trump has to keep the evangelicals from actually getting us into a nuclear war, because that's essentially, where they would normally head. That's something that Pence would do, because he's a very righteous guy, right? There's good and there's bad, and they're bad and we're good, and if we're not fighting the bad and killing the bad, then we're not good. It's kind of that simplistic, crusader mentality that you get in these people. So that's somewhat different than the neocons like John Bolton and Victoria Freeland and Samantha Powers and these people. They're not as far as they're concerned, there's no God, there's just power. So they're a little bit different in their orientation. But but they're going to get us to the same place. And then you have the rest of the world looking at Donald Trump as, okay, this guy is our only base, is our only hope to keep the U.S. from going into nuclear war. And so this is the paradox of our time, is that this president is perceived now finally in the world as the only way to keep the world from going into nuclear war. So this is, and then today, I don't know what happened in the meeting with Erdogan and the press conference with Erdogan, but Trump is basically responding to the impeachment hearing, says, I got more important things to do. We got this situation in the Middle East. We got the situation over here we got to deal with. You know, I'm the president, and that's what I'm doing. So it's a very strange and eerie period we're going into, where the entire media is going after a president whose popularity is holding pretty steady, and who is insisting on breaking with the previous policies of the previous government. Where is this all going to go? I don't know. Are they going to draw up a bill of impeachment and get it through? And on what grounds? I don't know. But they have to do it now, because by Christmas time, it's a little too late. You know, and if they get the bill of, if they just do a bill of impeachment and get that into the Senate, well, then they can't continue to have hearings all the time. You know, so they want to drag it out. So if they want to drag it out, they just want to drag it out with hearings and more hearings and more hearings and more hearings. Meanwhile, on the other side, Durham, the special prosecutor, and Bill Barr are preparing indictments, and you still have the Inspector General's report coming in as well. So you have these two things are going to come together, you know, with people like Comey and many others being indicted, criminally indicted, in this whole thing. So this is kind of a very strange world where you have one thing, which is the counter coup, and the other is the coup, and the counter coup and the coup are coming into each other, are clashing into each other. Stay tuned.